I've been training for 21 years. In that time, I've done every split imaginable. I've done full body 3 times per week. I've done 4-day upper and lower. I've done a bro split, done 5 days per week. I've trained 6 days per week using an Arnold split, push-pull legs, and I've done HIIT training 2 days per week. I've trained 7 days per week. You name it, I've done it. And you know what? All of these splits have worked to varying degrees, depending on my age, when I ran it, and my goals at the time. So if you're looking for the best training split for you right now, you need to first assess your goals, your age, and your training experience. But I'm also gonna break down my most productive training split for you right now. This way you know exactly what to look for when deciding what is the ideal training split for you. Or if you're just looking to skip that process completely and hop right into a productive training split, I've got you covered here. So let's jump into it. So for the past 12 to 15 of those 21 years of training, I really shifted into training no more than 5 days per week. Early on when I was a beginner, I could get away with a lot more, but it wasn't necessarily better. I just wasn't as strong or as advanced. So I just didn't have the same ability to push myself as hard as I do now. So at the time, I didn't need as much recovery. But as I've gotten bigger, as I've gotten stronger, I've found over and over again, if I'm pushing it hard consistently, more than 5 days per week in the gym, and eventually, after a few weeks, hit a brick wall. My progress would stall, I'd rack up more fatigue, start to get some aches and pains, and if I didn't listen to my body and I kept pushing it, I'd start to pick up some small injuries. Now, once I cut my training down to 5 days per week, I was able to keep the training intensity high every single session. I was able to recover properly between sessions, and I was able to progress consistently long term. Now, what I've also found is, despite how many days per week I train, I still needed to keep a moderately high training frequency for each muscle group. So I could train 5 days per week using a bro split, but I didn't get the same results as training 5 days per week, but spreading the volume for each body part up throughout the week. So some splits that worked much better for me here are basic upper and lower done twice per week with a 5th day dedicated to a weak body part, a 5-day hybrid split like chest and back, shoulders and arms, legs, off, upper, lower, off, or the last 2 days being a torso and limb split. But as I've gotten even more advanced the longer I trained, and as I've gotten older, I'm gonna be 36 this year, you have life stress, responsibility, and skill level and development all to factor in. And on top of that, now of course, age. And considering all that, I found that while 5 days per week is still an excellent setup for me, if there's one thing that's becoming increasingly difficult to recover from within that same 5-day split, it's training more than 2 days in a row. Now, a typical layout on a 5-day split for me would usually be Monday train, Tuesday train, Wednesday rest, Thursday, Friday, Saturday train, Sunday rest. And over time, what I found is that Saturday workout, I generally go into the gym and just be a bit beat up from the last 2 training sessions the last 2 days in a row. Because I personally take most of my sets in the gym to failure or near failure, I'm focusing on big compound heavy progressive lifts, and I train with a moderate to higher level of volume. There's just always a decent amount of emotional energy and psychological stimulation that's just required for me to get under those heavy loads and push them near failure. And what I found over the years is that when I come in for the first workout of the week, after a day of rest, I'm ready to go. I'm full of energy, my nervous system is firing on all cylinders. The next day I come in the gym, there's usually some soreness from the muscles I trained the day prior, but I'm still able to push the body parts that I have on tap for that day very hard. But now, that third day I come in the gym, after 2 days of training already, my nervous system just isn't always 100%. These workouts tend to drag a bit, and it generally takes a lot longer for me to get into each heavy set, especially mentally. And pushing through the pain barrier becomes increasingly difficult. Now, that's not to say that training 3 days in a row is off limits. In fact, the 5-day training split has built more muscle for me than any other split ever has. But over the years, I've developed a hard rule with myself. If I'm going to train any more than 2 days in a row, the third workout has to be a session that doesn't require me to amp myself up. For example, if I train 2 heavy days back to back, and the third day I go in and train arms, maybe even some shoulder work without any heavy pressing, I can rack up plenty of effective training volume in that session. And it doesn't require me to have to go all out. Let's face it, talking about something like training arms is not even in the same conversation as training something like legs or even back, or even chest for that matter. Now, in my early years, I would always train shoulders and arms on Saturday. This included a lot of shoulder pressing exercises. And just by the nature of a compound lift, even shoulder pressing required a bit more recovery demands and just general intensity to get through the workout. This worked for a long time for me. And again, it built the most muscle that any other split ever has. But again, as I've gotten older and as I've gotten stronger and more advanced, eventually I found that simply moving the presses from Saturday's workout to Monday's workout and just focusing Saturday on all the isolation exercises, hitting the biceps, the triceps, the side, middle, and rear delts, maybe even some traps on the day, I found that my recovery is just much better throughout the week. And today, that's one of the main things I'm focused on in programming. If we are gonna push for that 5th day, we should be hyper-focused on keeping that 5th day as manageable as possible for recovery. And this is what I personally do with all my clients who I have running 5-day splits. Generally, the first 4 workouts in the week are gonna be the most difficult, and the 5th workout, or the one that's trained after 2 training days consecutively, is gonna be the easiest. It's also something that I've adjusted in all my programs over the years. Even in something like my old school mass gain training system, on day 5, we hit shoulders and arms, but it's not a day based on big compound lifts. We save that for the other 4 training days. But in my own training, recently I have taken this even a step further. And I went back to a split that I had gotten away from, but previously enjoyed doing. And what I did was simply throw out the 7-day week. Now, most people are forced to fit their training into a 7-day weekly cycle, just based on lifestyle, work, and everything else. They might need weekends off, or they might have certain work days where it's easier or harder to get to the gym. And in that case, using a 7-day weekly split makes perfect sense. But now in the case of having more flexibility with your training, you can look at things outside of a 7-day week. And in my case, training no more than 2 days in a row has its benefits. So simply doing away with that 7-day week and taking the training that I'm already doing, but switching from a 5-day split to training 2 on, 1 off, repeat, that allows to spread my training out slightly more, but still keep the training frequency high, keeping the training intensity high, but again, training no more than 2 consecutive days without a rest day. Right now, this is one of my favorite ways to train, and lately it's been one of the most productive ways to train. Currently, I'm running my old school push-pull legs program, and with this frequency, it has me in the gym 4 to 5 days per week. Every body part with this setup is also being trained every 4 to 5 days. I'll train a body part, train it again 4 days later, train it again 5 days later, and then repeat. Now, for my age, my goals, and my training experience, this is personally the most ideal setup for my goals at the moment, especially due to the fact that I'm dieting. This is huge. My energy levels are definitely getting a bit low. I am on the tail end of my cut, so more rest days in my program, spreading the training volume out a bit more. It just flows very well with my goals at the moment. Now, as I finish up the cut, however, I am planning on going back to a 5-day setup. This will give me the ability to join my weekends a bit more. Right now, sometimes I train on Saturdays, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I train on Sundays, sometimes I train on both days. It really just depends what days of the week the cycle falls on. But the bottom line is, your body doesn't know a 7-day weekly cycle. So it's important to understand the advantages of using one, but also not being restricted by it if you don't have to be. But if you want the exact programs that I personally recommend to build more muscle using proven old school bodybuilding methods, access my old school mass gain training system by clicking the link below. And as always, if you want to see more of the best original bodybuilding content just like this, make sure to subscribe.